Right. Morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our bi-weekly Breakfast Club. Today we'll be chatting about cancer. So good to see a lot of the regulars and some new faces as well, so welcome to them. And then, yeah, just a couple of house rules from my side. I don't want to waste too much time. Guys, please just keep your cameras off and your microphones on mute, just purely because it sometimes serves as a bit of a distraction for the presenters. And yeah, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat function at the bottom. And if they're not answered during the course of the presentation, we will circle back to them at the end. Got some lovely guest speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the two ladies, Nikki and Annelie.
Thank you, Tyson. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet another Breakfast Club. The days go by so quickly. So I'm just going to introduce the speakers, and as you know, the topic is cancer is a word, not a sentence. I think that's such a lovely way to describe it. So today we've got, well, they're speakers, but also remember our Breakfast Club is really about our community. We're going to ask you to really participate. So our first guest, for first time actually, Yael, in Breakfast Club, has been a long time coming. She's going to speak to us about a very, very interesting article. And I'm not going to spend too much time introducing Yael. I'm sure you all know her, but as you know, she's probably the world's most renowned nutrigenomic specialist. And she is, as you know, the founder of 3x4, for maybe some of you are new. And we can't wait to hear what she's going to tell us about this idea about polygenic versus monogenic risks. And please, everybody, you did get a link to that article, so make sure you read it. I can't talk enough about how interesting it is, so make sure you read it. We actually sent you 2 articles this time. The other one is really long, but also really, really interesting. There's some really amazing infographics. And we also put a tool together about this one article, which I will share at the end of our talk. And also just for continuous, so we don't interrupt too much in between, I want to introduce you to our other 2 guests. So Dr. Craig Golding, again, thank you. Welcome, Craig, to our Breakfast Club. I know you also participate quite regularly. And just for those of you who don't know Craig, I don't know if there's anybody out there, Craig, who don't know you, but for those of you who don't, Dr. Craig Golding is a specialist physician, and he's an anti-aging physician. I really need to come and see you, Craig, in Johannesburg. Craig practices integrative medicine, and he combines natural medicines, nutraceuticals, bioidentical hormones. He also uses intravenous medicines, and when he needs to, he also use allopathics and other many medical biotechnologies to enhance the health of his clients. And we will also put Craig's website. He's the founder of the Golding Institute, and he does a lot of training. So a lot of you might have met Craig before. And then our other guest is Melanie Sweden, and she is she's got a philosophy when treating patients to find methods of healthcare that's curative and at least the least invasive way possible. And she says the body has an enormous ability to heal and self-correct given the right environment to do so. And therefore, she chooses modalities that focus on whole health care in order to reduce pain, promote well-being, as well as a positive outlook in life. I met Melanie the other day, and I'm sure you're going to love her, what she's got to share with us. And so with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nikki. I'm going to hand over to Yael, and then Nikki's going to interview our other guests. Welcome, Yael.
Thanks, Annelie. It was very hard work getting invited to speak at Breakfast Club. So I had to put up my hand and say, please, please, please give me 5 minutes, because there's such great presenters in Breakfast Club. And so thank you very much for having me. And it's such a great topic. I'm absolutely delighted to see Craig joining us this morning, and obviously Melanie. So I'll be listening attentively once I'm done. And the reason that I asked for my little 5 minutes is because once in a while, an extraordinary article comes across my desk, or I should say my desktop, that sometimes when I see it, I don't really understand the full implications of it. But this one really, really caught my eye, and it's something quite incredible. So I want to tell you a little bit about it. So we did include it in the invite, and I'm hoping after I've explained to you why it's so extraordinary, you'll go and have a good look at it. It was only published 2 months ago. It was published in August 2020, so it's extremely new, and was published in Nature Communications, which means that it's pretty well vetted. So what makes it extraordinary? So one of the problems we have in genetics is that we've always had the separation between monogenic and polygenic, or put another way, between high penetrance and low penetrance. So as you all know, or may all know, is that when we talk about penetrance, we talk about how impactful is the gene variance. How much does the gene variant contribute to the disease or the phenotype manifesting? So we talk about high penetrance, we talk about a very high impact. So a gene variant like the BRCA or familial hypercholesterolemia has a high likelihood of manifesting as breast cancer versus a low penetrance gene variant, which has a low impact. So by itself, a low penetrance gene variant will not cause a disease. You won't see it in a disease. It'll be contributing a small amount towards the biochemistry that will lead to the development of the disease. We know that in low penetrance, what becomes interesting is when you group all the SNPs together in a particular biochemical area, together they gain power. Excuse me. Now, what's been shown in this article is the idea that these are different conversations. And this has been the traditional way that genetics was managed, that high penetrance monogenic and low penetrance nutrigenomic style SNPs were kept in almost different arenas. So much so that genetic counselors were dealing with monogenic and all of you out there were dealing with polygenic. And I've always found this to be one of the great downfalls of the genetic discipline. And so I was so excited when I saw this article. And what they did is they actually produced an article a couple of years ago where they just look at the BRCA genes and they looked at a polygenic risk score. Now remember that the absolute foundational philosophy of 3x4 is this idea of a polygenic risk score, which we call pathway-based analysis. That when we group our SNPs together, we can create a score that gives us some indication of how these polygenes, these small incremental low penetrance genes, are coming together to impact a pathway. So there's no difference between polygenic and pathway-based analysis. And what they did was they looked at BRCA and they looked at a polygenic risk score of low penetrance, and they saw that there was something about the polygenic risk score that was changing the penetrance of the BRCA genes. And it was so interesting, they went on to create another study that was much more extensive to explore whether, in fact, this is something that, that was true. So in the study, what they did was they looked at BRCA, so that's a breast cancer and ovarian cancer. They looked at FH, familial hypercholesterolemia, and the genes involved in that. And they looked at Lynch syndrome. All of these have monogenic genes that are high penetrance. And then they looked at polygenic risk scores for each of these conditions. They studied 80,000 individuals. So this is not a small study. This is a huge, immense study that was done with the UK Biobank, 80,000 individuals. And when they looked at these monogenic disease, so when they looked at the BRCA, the FH, and the Lynch, they found that the probability of getting breast cancer with someone with the BRCA gene variants by the age of 75 was between 13% and 76%. The familial hypercholesterolemia, the chances of getting coronary heart disease at 75 years was between 17% and 78%. And the Lynch syndrome and colon cancer, was 11% to 80%. Now, there are many people who say to me, genes account for 50%, genes account for 30%. And as you can see from this, we can never, ever say that. Because with a BRCA gene, your chances of getting breast cancer is between 13% and 76%. So why? why are we seeing this extraordinary spectrum of penetrance or the chance of getting breast cancer? And the answer they were discovered was sitting in these polygenic risk scores. They absolutely showed that these polygenic risk scores were driving the penetrance of the monogenic risk. Now, of course, this is completely and totally relevant to what we are doing at 3x4, because we are building polygenic risk. When we talk about cancer, we're going to talk about today, what are the pathways that would impact the development of cancer? So why it's so important is we have never stepped into the world of BRCA and FH. We've actually stepped back and said, it's not our face, our space. But what if we could be working alongside oncologists, alongside genetic counselors and saying, actually, it's entirely our space. Because what they've actually shown is when these polygenic risk scores are impactful enough and have enough penetrance, they are as powerful and as impactful as a single monogenic gene. So I hope that's enough to give you some thought about why this is one of those totally extraordinary articles that can change the whole ecosystem of what we're doing in genetics. And I hope you'll all read it. And I'm so excited. I'm going to hand over now to whoever's speaking next. But thank you very much for my 5 minutes.
Oh, Yael, thank you so much for setting that scene. That is the most interesting article. And as Yael mentioned, it is in your folders. So please go and have a read through it. I would now like to welcome again Craig, both a friend and a colleague, to the Breakfast Club. And Craig, the question that we posed to Craig and asked him to discuss in the Breakfast Club is, how do you integrate the 3x4 genetic blueprint into your decision-making around a treatment protocol for a cancer patient? What does this look like and how does it work? So Craig, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks, Yael, and hello to everyone. And thank you for having a listen to what I have to say. I hope you can all hear me. So, as you know, I deal with a lot of cancer patients, and the first thing that I want to emphasize in a cancer patient is cancer is a metabolic disease, and we know that it's a mitochondrial dysfunction before it's a gene dysfunction. So a few years ago, I got a book, and I've got your 3x4 blueprint here. So just as important is this book, Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson. So this book is a very nice book which summarizes the importance of the approach to a stage 4 cancer, which is basically mitochondrial medicine, but DCA, dichloroacetic acid, and 2-deoxyglucose with a ketogenic diet. That will switch off cancer metabolism and engage time for you to do mitochondrial medicine to help your mitochondria recover, which is CoQ10, PQQ, ubiquinol, phospholipids, phosphatidylcholine, and all our photodynamic therapies that we do to restore mitochondrial function. So the essence, and since I have 15 minutes to talk and not 15 hours or 15 days, the essence of it is we want to know mitochondrial function in a cancer patient. So how do I translate that to the 3x4 nutrigenomic report? And I see these every day because people come to me with them or I request them, but mostly people are actually coming to me with them with another problem. Let's say diabetes, dementia, pre-dementia, inflammatory conditions, rheumatoid conditions, detox conditions, metal toxicity, or cancer, as we're talking about today. So most of these diseases are degenerative diseases associated with aging. And as you know, I do a lot of research in anti-aging research and anti-aging medicine. So when we're looking at mitochondrial health, the genes that I'm very interested in is the PGC1 alpha. That's your mitochondrial biogenesis gene. There's others that have an influence on that, like AMPK and other sirtuin genes and other background players that are very important. But biogenesis, making of new mitochondria through PQQ and related nutraceuticals, is PGC1 alpha. That's how you make mitochondria. Then how do you break them down is called mitophagy. or autophagy, which is gaining a lot of interest in the anti-aging world. And we want to get rid of these old cells, senescent cells, and that's autophagy, mitophagy. So those genes, mitophagy-related genes, are controlled by FOXO, F-O-X-O. So I posted a nice article on mitochondria and aging in my Facebook posts. I'm happy to send you that article as well. I get it from academia.edu. It's a subscription I pay for to get education on anti-aging research. But in essence, you want your biogenesis of mitochondria in place with your PGC1 alpha strategies. You want mitophagy and autophagy with your FOXO gene. And then you want good oxidative phosphorylation. That's in the middle, right? That's when we are alive and well. Even when we're sick, we want oxidative phosphorylation to work well. And that's where the 3x4 is very useful. So I want to know how much oxidative stress the body is under. So as Yael so correctly says there in her chat this morning as well, is that we want to know these polygenes or polygene effects on various metabolic processes in the body. So what is the oxidative stress that someone is under? That's from reactive oxygen species or nitrosative species. So you have oxidative stress and nitrosative stress. So we can see how much oxidative stress you have by looking at your nutrigenomics gene report with various genes grouped together to tell us how much oxidative stress you have. The more oxidative stress you have, the more antioxidant therapies I'm going to include in my cancer therapies. So the genes that I'm interested in anti-aging medicine and mitochondrial medicine are basically your NRF2, your AMPK, and then other sort of metabolic genes, insulin receptor, leptin receptor, inflammatory genes, NFK, B, those kinds of genes are all involved with oxidative phosphorylation. So inflammation, oxidative stress, detoxification gene pathways, all very, very relevant to healthy mitochondrial function. So what kind of detox SNPs am I interested in? I'm very, very interested in methylation SNPs, MTHFR, COMT. I'm interested in glutathione SNPs, GSTM1, GSTT. These will tell me how well someone is detoxifying. So I want to know their oxidative stress. I want to know their inflammation genes, IL-1, IL-6, TNF, alpha, all these inflammation genes grouped together so nicely in this 3x4 report. I want to know your detox pathways to know how much detoxification I need to do in the cancer patient. I don't go and chelate every patient because I don't want to get rid of copper, for example, which is part of your oxidative phosphorylation complex 4 in your inner mitochondrial membrane. So I'm not going to aggressively chelate everyone. I want to know what their mineral and metal status is. So I do an oligoscan for that. And their 3x4 report will tell me how their detoxification pathways are working, how much inflammation risk they carry, and I can do a blood test called a CRP or an IL-6 to go with this report. And I can do a homocysteine level to go with the methylation gene report. And we can do reduced glutathione or GSG, GSSH ratio at functional labs to check how much glutathione or reduced glutathione you have. But the importance of the 3x4 is that I can see, here's your oxidative stress, here's your inflammation risk, here's your detoxification risks, or as I explain to patients, your weaknesses, which we can then with food and nutraceuticals overcome. And then patients, because I see so many people, they come to me with, what should I do with food? So my first step is to do what Jimenez does, my friend that I lecture with in Germany and Asia. He says no sugar, gluten, dairy, and we'll talk about the rest, which is a nice answer because Gerson therapy is obviously on the charts. And what is Gerson? It's juicing plus coffee enemas for detox, for those SNPs that you may have, so it enhances your bowel flow and detox. And he adds in Max Gerson and his daughter, Charlotte, they're both deceased, unfortunately, but they add in a bit of calf liver. Why? Because the liver you know, phosphatidylcholine and B vitamins helps methylation and liver function and detox, and even voltage medicine. But that's another topic which I spoke about earlier this morning, phosphatidylcholine. But the other thing that I get on with cancer treatments is, should I do hypothermia? They ask me because they read about it on Dr. Google. And we do hypothermia, but what I like about nutrigenomics reports is they will tell me if the patient has heat shock proteins or if they're heat shock protein sensitive. If they're sensitive, like I have a lady at the moment with metastatic pancreas, she's very sensitive to heat shock proteins on her report. And she has a couple of doctors, including me, looking after her, and she's done quite well with the alternative approaches. Conventional failed her. So she's doing hypothermia because I know that she's heat shock protein sensitive. So I get that from a sensitivity lab in Greece, RGCC Gen Lab, but I can also get a lot of nutrigenomic help with the 3x4 nutrigenomic report. For the heat shock proteins, and the next level that we're probably going to be looking for is cold shock proteins for dementia. That's going to be particularly relevant going forward with dementia becoming an epidemic. The other one that patients ask me is, can I drink coffee? And I tell them yes, because coffee is, you know, it's an inhibitor of interleukin 8, so it will stop the spread of cancer, but also coffee, it's a healthy beverage. So I have my coffee here, for example. I love my coffee, and I also love my celery juice to help with my liver detox. So beverages are important, and on the 3x4 report, it will tell you, you know, your lactose sensitivity, your caffeine sensitivity or tolerance, and patients find that useful to see if they're caffeine tolerant, if they can have coffee. I tell them coffee is healthy because they'll read in a lot of healthy books or health books that coffee is bad for you. That's bullshit. Coffee is good for you, but obviously too much coffee can cause a bit of cortisol elevation and anxiety and insomnia. That's not good for you because that's, you know, immune system health. You don't want to stress and you want to sleep well. That's part of the immune system and detox too. So it's very important for the patients to know, are they heat shock protein, you know, or heat shock sensitive, or are they cold sensitive? Perhaps Yael can help me more there with selective genes for heat and cold sensitivity. That would help patients a lot, because cold therapy, I think, is gaining popularity around the world as an anti-aging modality, you know, cryotherapy. We do heat therapy in practice, hypothermia. I still want to get to the level where we're doing cold therapy, but for now, I tell patients to take a cold shower or take a swim in the swimming pool, you know, when it's hot. Like my niece at the moment is living with me. She's taking a swim in the cold pool, which is wonderful. It's cold therapy. Or hypothermic. But in practice, here at my practice in Houghton, we're doing hyperthermic. So infrared saunas, Wellness Pod, USA Wellness Pod, infrared, it's heating, it's hypothermia. So cold, I mean, caffeine, salt, and lactose sensitivity and tolerance I get from the 3x4. Heat shock proteins I get from our RGCC Gen Lab in Greece and Switzerland. And those are all found very useful. So Nikki, you asked me not to get carried away with metabolic stuff and so on, but there's some other lovely books. I mean, this guy lectures a lot in the US.
Just raise it for us. We can't see, Craig. Just raise it. Awesome. Thank you.
It's
outside the box.
It's again, the essence of it is that cancer is a metabolic disease. So it's mitochondrial health and then genes. So, but the genes are very important. And as Yael says, if I can paraphrase Yael, it's the clusters of those genes, or put them together, and then you get a polygene, which is as if, you know, effective on the body in terms of therapy and effect in terms of causative pathology, causing of pathology, as a monogene would be for a Fanconi anemia or familial hypercholesterolemia or Lynch or whatever the case might be. So I think Yael in her wisdom has put together these polygenes together, which makes interpretation as the doctor and for Nikki as the dietitian, it makes the interpretation so much easier and so much quicker for us. She's made life easy for us. So thank you, Yael. We are very grateful, because otherwise, I mean, yesterday I won't mention the lab. But I've got a pile, I promise you, it is this thick. It is thicker than this book from another lab of all these gene SNPs. It's fantastic and wonderful. But it takes me a while to read through all of that. Whereas when I see the polygenes together, I can say, right, this is your oxidative stress, this is your inflammation risk, this is your detox SNPs. And then I put it all together for the patient and I translate it to them. And the vitamin D receptor is another one I look at. MNSOD is another one I look at for sulfation and superoxide dismutase. And vitamin D, we know, is so important, not just for COVID, but for cancer, breast cancer, lymphoma, colon cancer, and others. It's so important for immune, and we know the genetic effects that vitamin D has on the body. So the vitamin D receptor is so important, and the nutrigenomics involved with that is so important, as is insulin receptor, you know, with metabolic consequences. So I'd like you to have a look at, Nikki, maybe I can forward you that mitochondrial article, because a sketch, you know, a picture is worth so many words. So the one is the biogenesis, making new mitochondria, that's your PGC1 alpha. Your breaking down is your FOXO, FOXO, that's autophagy, mitophagy. And then in the middle, you've got oxidative phosphorylation. That's where your inflammation, NF-kappa B, NRF, those genes come into play. AMPK, even mTOR comes in there, the mammalian target of rapamycin. We have rapamycin, but I don't use it in medicine unless it's a cancer patient, because I want mTOR activation, which, I mean, lowering of mTOR, which is really achievable with resveratrol NMN, not the sweetie, the molecule, nicotinamide mononucleotide and NAD riboside, we use those. And if you're wanting to read an interesting article on that, Longevity magazine next month, November 1, is on that. Helped Giselle Wertham Ames write that article on longevity medicine and mitochondria and inflammation and how these genes are all, well, lifestyle medicine is all involved with that. So it's food, lifestyle, exercise, fasting, intermittent fasting, restricted time eating, calorie restriction, nutrient-dense foods, and where the nutrigenomics can help you, it can tell you where your SNPs are, where your weaknesses are, and how you can repair that, or not necessarily repair, but how you can get over that weakness or bypass that weakness by using food as medicine and supplements, the right nutraceuticals. You know my favorites, Nikki: sulforaphane, resveratrol, EGCG, vitamin D, curcumin, omega-3, all of these wonderful nutraceuticals that we have, and you can choose the own company, I mean, the company that you want to use for your products. That's not what this talk is about, or this chat is about. It's about knowing when to use which molecule, and that's when where the nutrigenomics helps so much. So thanks for letting me have my 15 minutes. I think my time says almost up.
Craig, thank you so much. So basically, in a nutshell, the whole 3x4 cellular
The whole
pathway.
3x4.
Absolutely. Insulin pathways, absolutely. I'm very excited to hear some of our new SNPs. So for those of you who haven't seen our new report, there are a lot of the new SNPs in our new report that Craig has actually referred to. So Craig, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us this morning. I definitely have learned a lot. And for those of you who only heard that Craig tells patients to throw out foods, he does refer to me to put other foods back in and improve the patient's diets. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Craig.
I'm going to mute myself and carry on listening.
Fabulous. And if you will send those articles, we definitely will make them available to our network. So thank you very much for the offer to share those articles.
I have put some of them under Craig Golding, my Facebook feed.
Okay.
So mitochondria, sirtuins, you know, all of those kinds of things.
Awesome. Thanks,
I'll
Craig.
send them to you, Nikki.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks.
Melanie.
Everyone listening, eh?
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, we have Melanie Sweden, who is a chiropractor homeopath and works very closely with the Santon Oncology Center here in Johannesburg. So I'm very lucky that today's Breakfast Club is two of my practitioners in my area. So welcome, Melanie. Melanie, we had the most incredible discussion with you the other day about how you approach a cancer patient. And we've really come to realize that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on your approach to your cancer patients when you get referrals from the Sandton Oncology.
Thank you. So thanks for the invite. And this is actually my very first Breakfast Club. And I'm talking on the Breakfast Club. So it's a bit intimidating to start off with, especially when I start hearing all the SNPs and all the science, and I'm still quite new to 3x4. But thank you for the invite anyway. So you're quite right in terms of there really isn't one size that fits all. And it is a multi-dimensional approach that we should have to our patients. And even though I'm a chiropractor and I'm a homeopath, the patients that come and see me, majority of them, I'm dealing with integrative oncology. And I don't know why it's been like that, but it's been like that for the last 15 years. So when I first started in terms of trying to formulate my philosophy around cancer treatments and cancer therapy, I actually couldn't get a conversation with any of the oncologists. They wouldn't speak to me because I was a chiropractor. They wouldn't speak to me because I was a homeopath. And it was seen as a little bit too alternative. And at the time, I remember thinking it was so unfair because we're meant to be practicing patient-centered medicine. And it's not about the practitioner, the patient, right? And a lot of the time when patients come and see me and I ask them, well, what do you have? They can't tell me the exact diagnosis. They are in such a fearful state. They don't know what the X, Y, and Z is. So I needed the oncologist to tell me what the X, Y, and Z was. But I couldn't engage in conversation with any of the oncologists. They wouldn't talk to me. And that in itself, in hindsight, looking over the last 15 years, was actually quite a gift because that's what formulated my philosophy in that I really don't need to rely on the diagnosis when dealing with the patient in front of me, okay? So I took very much a systems-based approach and a symptomatic-based approach, which is how I would normally consult with somebody with a common cold or flu or a sore toe. What sets one patient apart from another? So I can get two patients with the exact same diagnosis of breast cancer and they've gone through the same machine in terms of their allopathic oncology approach. But what makes those two patients different? And that's where I found that I tend to sit, and that's where I like to treat my patients. So that's where my philosophy grew in terms of a more patient-centered approach. Also, in terms of being able to provide a safe space for patients to talk, and a safe space for patients to be angry, and a safe space for patients to say whatever they needed to say, because they were too scared to say it to their oncologist. They were too fearful to ask certain questions, and they didn't want to say certain things to family members, because family members are always like, well, you're looking so well, or you know, you X, Y, and Z. Meanwhile, they're feeling so bad and so terrible. So I offer that space for them. You wanted to find out about the mind-body connection, and I know I did this experiment with you last week when we spoke, but the easiest way to explain it, and this is how I explain it to my patients, is that we're creating neurological pathways in our body all the time. Whether it's a good experience that we're exposed to or a bad experience that we're exposed to, a trauma, something joyful, we're creating these pathways all the time, whether you like it or not. So if I had to take a lemon in front of the whole audience now, and I cut up that lemon and I gave everybody a piece of that lemon, and I said, please, I want you to suck on that lemon and chew on that lemon and bite on that lemon. 9 times out of 10, you're having a reaction in your mouth, you're producing saliva. just by talking about the lemon. There's no lemon in your mouth. So you're having a physiological reaction to a complete mental and emotional construct. And so when I'm talking to my patients, a lot of the time, it is very much a mental and an emotional sphere that we are speaking in. A lot of the time, they're very disconnected with what's happening in their body. It's complete fear. Even the language that we choose with cancer, I mean, cancer is such a huge topic anyway, and how we approach it is such a big topic, but everything is a war on cancer, and we have to kill these cells, and we have to do X, Y, and Z. And a patient of mine put it so beautifully once. She's in remission now, and she came and she said, Mel, but I love my boob. I was like, what? So she goes, I love my boob, even though the cells have gone a little bit haywire. And I was like, that's such a brilliant concept, because we constantly, I hate what's happening to my body, and I hate the fact that it's failing, and I want to destroy the cancer and get rid of it. So the language that we choose is very much the war on self, where she put it into context in that, well, it's actually, we should generate a love of self, because that's where healing exists. So my philosophy too, when I first started out, I was researching all different types of therapies because I was looking for that magic bullet. And it's amazing how in oncology itself, it's one of the fastest growing medical research arenas. And it's so fast growing because they don't have the answer. They don't have magic bullets. It's the same with nutraceuticals. We don't have the magic bullet. So perhaps we need to kind of say, well, the magic bullet is actually the patient. It's not the practitioner. It's not the nutraceuticals that we give them. It's empowering the patients to understand that they really are the magic bullet, and they hold the key to their healing on whatever level it might take place. Perhaps they need healing on a mental and emotional level. Perhaps they need healing on a physical level. It's not up to us to decide, it's up to the patient to decide. So in my practice too, we also talk about things that a lot of practitioners and a lot of family members or a lot of doctors don't necessarily want to talk about. And it's the final stages of life. So it's the meaning of life. What does death mean? Have you sorted out your will? Have you said what you needed to say? Have you forgiven yourself, forgiven others? It's conversations that people are too frightened to have. And I think from a human to human experience, we should be having these things. And as a medical practitioner, yes?
I think we should be having those things with everybody, not just cancer patients.
Absolutely. Absolutely, with everybody. And as a medical practitioner, regardless of what field you practice in, I mean, I'm a chiropractor, for goodness sake. I specialize in scoliosis. But there again, it's a neurological thing. I'm all about the nervous system. Whatever modality we choose to bring into our practices, it really is our responsibility to understand that one day you will have somebody that has got cancer that will walk through your door. So it's our responsibility to open ourselves up to the potential to heal them using, not heal them, treat them using your tools. And sometimes it can just take a word of encouragement. Sometimes it's something that you might abstractly say, something that you would do, something that you would recommend, or somebody who you would refer to that creates a safer healing environment for them. So in order to get, I wouldn't say buy-in, but we do need buy-in from our patients. Is that I always try and explain it as an energy value for them. So Craig, you put it beautifully in terms of the mitochondrial stuff. And if I had to talk to my patients about mitochondrial stuff, they will get up and they will walk out because they'll say, Mel, it's not why I'm here. Okay? But we understand that it exists there. So the way that I explain it is that it's an energy value, right? And not energy as in woo-woo energy, it's our actual physical energy that keeps us going on a daily basis. So every given moment in time, even sick people, we're trying to create a constant state of homeostasis. And that requires cellular energy, all right? And that cellular energy is there to constantly detox, is to constantly repair, it's constantly to heal. And that requires an enormous amount of energy 24/7. So in order to get their buy-in, what I say to them is that imagine if you took some of that energy and helped the body out by feeding it good food. So it doesn't have to detox so much. So perhaps not 2 liters of Coke a day, perhaps 2 liters of water a day. Or you need to look at those toxic relationships that you're trying to process on a daily basis. Perhaps you need to start withdrawing from that, because the amount of energy that you're using to keep your body in a state of homeostasis is quite large. So if we start removing some of those things that are known toxins, environmental toxins, chemical toxins, we would rather use that energy from a healing point of view. And that seems to make sense to them because they're doing it anyway. Their body is in a constant state of healing and repair. It just goes off the path every now and again. So we are facilitators. We're facilitators in this entire process, whatever tool you have in your toolbox. So for myself, I use a lot of chiropractic adjusting because cancer patients, everybody thinks they can't be touched. You can't adjust a chiropractic patient, a cancer patient. You can't, they can't be physically manipulated, or they shouldn't have too much acupuncture, or whatever the case may be. I use all of those modalities. So if all the modalities that I choose, I have to know that I am going to be responsible for all of them. So whatever you prescribe, know that you should take full responsibility for them. And that's another part of my philosophy, in that if I cannot do something on my children, so if I'm not prepared to prescribe X, Y, and Z to my children, or do a particular acupuncture point or a chiropractic adjustment, I will not do it for my patients. And that's very important to me, because then I know I have complete confidence in that how I treat my patients is how I would lovingly treat my family members. So a lot of the time, as practitioners, we haven't even experienced half the stuff we prescribe. We might, and maybe I'm a bit strange, but every single thing in my dispensary I've actually taken. Yep. Because how can I prescribe Silvestrol or CBD oil if I haven't taken it myself?
Absolutely,
so I think
100%.
Yeah, I think it's very important to be.
That is amazing. Absolutely love that, Melanie. Another question that we often get asked at 3x4, because one of our super favorite supplements is sulforaphane, and we get told that you cannot do it with chemotherapy, you cannot do it with tamoxifen, and you had a really useful kind of handle for us as practitioners on how to space those. So if you could just share that with us now.
So my tip for that, because most of the time your practitioners don't know, or your old school allopathic doctors don't know what these things are. So because they don't know, they just say, well, just don't do it, okay? Which is fine, fair enough. But the way that I structure it with my patients is that the day before, the day of, and the day after treatment, there's absolutely no nutraceutical intervention at all. They stop everything. Because if you think about it from an oncology point of view, and if you come in from that paradigm, they want to give the most toxic dose to the patient possible. And I can understand that. So it needs to be as toxic as possible, needs to be as targeted as possible. And you don't necessarily want too much detoxification and clearing out of the body taking place. So the oncologists that do speak to me now, and we have an open communication, are happy with that in terms of nothing the day before, nothing the day of, and the day after.
And you also have a similar philosophy that you shared with us around tamoxifen, because
Yes.
we often get women who have had breast cancer and they now are on tamoxifen, and they
Yes.
equally are fearful of taking these supplements because it's going to affect the tamoxifen.
Yeah.
So can you just give us an idea with that one?
So it's the exact same principle. And also you wouldn't take the things together. So a lot of these drugs have got a particular half-life. So all the nutraceuticals that I like to prescribe, and everybody has their favorites, they are quite bioavailable. Well, we should be choosing bioavailable stuff, right? So when we take it, it gets absorbed almost immediately, just as if you're having like a high nutrient dense lacquer salad in front of you. You're basically absorbing it quite quickly. So if patients are taking medication on a daily basis, I would do a lot of their nutraceuticals before. So on an empty stomach right at the beginning of the day, and then wait a couple of hours. And if they're having normal allopathic medicines, I would take it after that. Because by that time, a lot of your nutraceuticals have been absorbed. But the same principle would apply. So say, if, for instance, they're having a Herceptin or whatever every 3 weeks, it would be the day before, the day of, and the day after, absolutely nothing.
Very useful. And then our last question, Melanie, what made you want to use the 3x4 report in your practice, and how would you be looking at it from a cancer patient point of view?
Okay, so it was it last year, 2019, Yale came and spoke at our chiropractic congress, and I just absolutely fell in love with you, Yale. It was just amazing. It was like, wow. And I've been thinking of doing DNA testing for a while, or genetic testing, but I didn't really know, because it's quite overwhelming. I didn't really know what to look for. And what got me was when Yale said we're looking at the 4 pathways or 4 things and only modulate 3 of them. I'm like, that's amazing, because then I'll have buy-in from our patients. Because they don't want to walk out with a bag of nutraceuticals. It's going to be overwhelming, right? They don't want to walk out with pages and pages of recommendations. They're not going to do any of them. So I like the fact that it was so succinct and precise. So for me, I want to know what's working and what's not working. So I don't want to prescribe a medication, say for instance, HCC or Silvestrol or the CBD or whatever, and genetically it's probably not the best thing for them. So for myself as a practitioner, I would like to streamline that process a little bit better. So when we do choose nutraceuticals, it is that much more specific. So that's the reason.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And just a comment, I know Craig commented on another report that's reams and reams of paper. And that coming from someone who's a speed reader is an amazing compliment to 3x4. So yeah, Melanie, thank you so much for your insights and for sharing your knowledge, and to Craig for sharing all those resources. We'll definitely make them available. And I'm now going to hand over to Annelie. If you can hang on, Melanie, because I'm sure there are questions that are going to be posed to you. So if you wouldn't mind hanging on,
okay.
But I'm handing
over
to
have to
Annelie.
leave by 11, so please don't feel I'm being rude. I just switch off.
No, we do know that.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie. Thanks.
Yes.
Wow, thank you so much. That was amazing to listen to the 2 of you. And we always say when we have these things that we need to have you back because there's so much more. And so thank you so much. So I hope you can all see my screen. So this is a tool that we put together for you with the help of our brilliant Vinny, and also looking at the article and a lot of input. And really what we want to do here is give you this tool to use in your practice so that you can explain to your patients. So again, to not overwhelm them, is really to have the conversation with your patients about what are the things that will be environmental factors that contribute to either to prevention or what we want to do in terms of treatment, or even if somebody's already had cancer and you want to look at longevity and improving their quality of life. And then that's on the left-hand side. And that actually comes from this article that we sent you where they talk about, that was this one, cancer is a preventable disease that requires major lifestyle changes. So please have a look at that. There's some really important information in there. And then on the other side will be the genetics. So we thought we would add the pathways that are the most important. Of course, everything else you will look at. But as Craig said, it's a mitochondrial disease. I also read an article somewhere that talks about cancer as a wound that doesn't heal. So I thought that was a very interesting way to put that. I don't know how you feel about that, Craig and Melanie, but that was interesting. There's actually some articles about that somewhere. But if we look at the pathways that are the most important to consider would be inflammation. And yes, we do have the FOXO genes in there now, those transcription factors. Oxidative stress, like Craig said, methylation, and detox, so all your cellular pathways. And then in the systems pathways, glucose and insulin. And actually what we could add there, which I think we'll think about, is vitamin D as well. So remember the vitamin D also playing a huge role. So that is my contribution for today. And we will put this in your share folder as well for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Annalie. So Tyson, have you been watching our question chat box for us?
I have indeed, and there were a couple, but majority of them were answered. I know Yale just does have one. She's asking desperately. So Yale, over to you.
Thank you, Tyson. I was going to have to just unmute myself, but thanks for letting me ask. So it's a question both for Craig and Melanie. As I mentioned in the chat, at the recent PLMI conference, I listened to probably what for me was one of the most impactful and extraordinary conversations of the whole conference. I don't know if you know Dr. Patrick Hanaway. He's been a very big deal in functional medicine, and he's been responsible for the Cleveland Clinic. And we heard a year ago the devastating news that he had an extremely aggressive throat cancer, and he kind of dropped out of circulation. And he suddenly popped up again at PLMI, where he was interviewed by Jeff Bland, him and his wife, who's also a practitioner, about his journey with throat cancer and what they did. And I don't know who's got access to PLMI, and I don't know if I'll be able to get a recording, but it was something quite extraordinary to hear what their journey looked like. And both at a diet, lifestyle, and spiritual level, which they address the spiritual side of things a great deal. But of course, they talk a lot about the diet. And he actually had an NG tube, which is no surprise because he had throat cancer. And they committed to a ketogenic diet using a lot of ingredients that were grown in their garden, a lot of green stuff, and which they had to create tube feeds for a ketogenic diet. And it didn't exist. There is no tube feeds for a ketogenic diet. So they had to actually come up with them and create them and test them. And so it's really an extraordinary story that I'll try to share with you. But I just wanted to get your opinion, Craig, on when and why and how would you use a ketogenic diet? Is it for everyone? Is it in certain cancers? I thought that would be a great question to answer.
I'll unmute myself for a few minutes then. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to diets, obviously it's a very personalized thing. So the nutrigenomics helps me there as well, because if they have a PPAR is one of the anti-aging genes. So if they have PPAR, increased fat storage, carbohydrate responsiveness, that for me is a recipe for a good response to ketotarian. So Will Cole wrote a lovely book. He's also a functional medicine doc in the US. And he wrote a lovely book called Ketotarian, which I actually make available to my patients. And his newest one is Inflammation Spectrum. So if they have the right genes for carbohydrate responsiveness, in other words, low carb, more keto type response, then I'm going to suggest to them ketotarian. But not everyone is for ketotarian. Some people, because it's personalized, and I believe in personalized medicine, some people do a little bit better on carbs than others. And you and I both know, Yael, that sometimes carbs make you feel better, right? I mean, a pasta here and there and a good quality sourdough bread, and it makes you feel good. So I wouldn't say everybody, go Gerson therapy or go ketotarian or go keto. What I would say is, to a cancer patient in particular, is no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, and we'll talk about the rest. That's what my friend Jimenez, Hope for Cancer in South States, says, Mexico. That's where he practices. Well, he's had to go hiding because, he's not liked by pharma and conventional medicine, right? So anyway, so I'm a huge fan of ketotarian. What works for me doesn't necessarily work for everyone else. I like salmon and lots of veggies and ketotarian approach and oils, olive oil and MCT oils and nuts and seeds, even for that matter. I like all of that, but I'm also a South African. So if my friends come around, I'm going to have a braai and I'll bless the food and hope that the animal didn't suffer. Honestly. Because I think being grateful is very much part of being a healthy human being. Being appreciative is very important, and saying thank you, before eating, and blessing the food and hoping that the animal is treated properly if you're going to eat animal products. Some people on the health journey decide no more animal products and they'll go up to vegan. So it's a personalized decision. It's your own journey as an individual to make your own dietary choices. But I think nutrigenomics, your panel, Yale 3x4, can guide us as to saying how responsive you may well be to a ketotarian diet. Also, endurance, power training, it gives you lifestyle advice, like what kind of exercise, what kind of diet can I embrace for myself on my personal journey. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to do the 3x4, right? Then I would just listen to Dr. Golding and do what he says.
Thanks, Greg. It's a great answer. And I definitely will look at the ketotarian, but I totally agree. I really battle with keto and it's not my natural thing. And it actually makes me feel very unhappy as a person. So totally get it. So thank you. Melanie, I wonder if you're still with us. I know you've got a few more minutes before you have to jump off.
Yeah.
A large part of what Patrick spoke about in his journey was his spiritual journey. Yeah. And I've forgotten the word. I'm just having a brain freeze of in the American Indian culture where they become like
shaman.
Thank you, shaman. So both Patrick and his wife is a shaman, and so they created a pilgrimage to I think it was, I can't remember, somewhere in Mexico, where they actually went and they created and they planned the journey, and it had all these spiritual, it was like the Camino of shamanism for them. And they said that was an absolutely fundamental part of his healing, and with his wife, they did it together. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think spirituality really has to come into the conversation. When I view my patients, I always see them as threefold. So spiritual beings first and foremost. Some people aren't comfortable to talk about that in the initial consult, but we get there. And then we're mental and emotional beings, and we're having a physical experience. So I think we really do need to honor every aspect of ourselves. There's an excellent book by Anita Moorjani. It's called Dying to Be Me. And she was riddled with cancer. She had tumors all over her body. And she had an intensely spiritual experience where her view was direct communication with God. And she was basically dying in hospital, and she had a spiritual experience where she lifted up out of her body, and she could see the connection between people, but the spiritual connection between people. And that's where her healing came from in terms of her tumors. So Anita Moorjani, Dying to Be Me, it's an excellent read. There was also a neurosurgeon, I forget his name, but I will post it as soon as I remember it. He had a very similar experience. He went into a coma, and his experience of his coma, he could actually feel everybody praying for him. So his healing again for him, he was his own magic bullet, came from a spiritual aspect. He's a brain surgeon, a neurosurgeon. I'll get the name. So I think it's very important to go there. I think it's very important to bring in spirituality, because all of these things that we have around us in terms of our food, the genetic tests, the nutraceuticals, they're just tools. but we are the beings that use those tools, and that needs to be honored in quite a big way. So I'm not surprised that they went on that ritual journey.
Thank you very much. Okay, Nikki and Annalie, back to you. Thank you very much, Melanie and Craig. Absolute delight having you join us today. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all. And I'm going to hand over to Tyson to close up for us. Thank you, Yael. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Melanie. And thank you to
one more thing. I just did a little search there. It's Dr. Eben Alexander, the brain surgeon who got meningitis.
Yes,
the
that's
spiritual.
it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Over to you, Tyson.
Awesome. So thanks so much, Craig, Melanie, Yael, for sharing your insights and all your knowledge with us. And thank you obviously to everyone once again for attending. Our next one is going to be on the 4th of November. We'll be dealing with gut, and Christine Harton will be dialing in all the way from Australia. So that will definitely be one not to be missed. But have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.